6 spine-chilling tales of terrifying internet weirdos. Discover the sinister secrets revealed. Sarah paced the cold, flickering fluorescent lights of the pharmacy, the aisles whispering secrets of forgotten prescriptions. The night desk was quiet, but she felt a heaviness in the air, something palpable pressing down on her. The small suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, with its white picket fences and lazy summer nights, felt eerie under the silver glow of the moon. It was during these long hours that she lost herself in worry, as the clock ticked ever louder. But her greatest fear was not her job. It was Ethan. "Mom, you won't believe it. I made a new friend online." Ethan's voice burst through her mind like a firecracker, full of excitement. But the name he mentioned, Mr. Shadow, sent ripples of unease through her. Who was this figure lurking behind a screen? As she completed the restocking of cold medications, Sarah's thoughts raced back to the cryptic call she had once heard about internet creeps preying on kids from the dark caverns of the web. When she confronted Ethan later, his bright eyes glazed from the screen. She saw a boy lost in a digital realm, counting each gaming achievement like trophies on a shelf. "He's cool, Mom. He's telling me all about these crazy challenges," he said, grinning wide. But behind that grin, Sarah felt something was wrong. It gnawed at her like a relentless burr under her skin. As she poured Ethan's cereal the next morning, her dread crystallized when she spotted a parcel on the porch, a twisted doll with hair made of brittle strands and eyes that seemed too shifty, alongside a note signed Mr. Shadow. Suddenly, laughter in the streets felt distant and wrong. Days passed, and the news brought tales of local children gone missing, fingers pointing to wannabe predators online. Sarah's heart raced as she shuffled through grocery aisles, panic creeping like frost in her veins, each shadow seeping suspicion into her mind. Could this be connected? Surely a harmless online friend wouldn't send her, a single mother, spiraling down this dark abyss of fear. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, Sarah cracked open Ethan's door. The glow from his screen illuminated the room where a palpable energy tangled with confusion and fear. "Ethan, we need to talk about Mr. Shadow," she stammered. But the words got tangled in the air like smoke. Instead of comfort, panic rolled off her tongue, and he dismissed her concerns with a wave. But the atmosphere felt thicker, menacing. The strange doll reappeared, pelting her sanity day by day. Neighbors cast odd glances. Whispers painted fears that crawled like insects under her skin. Why did it seem like eyes watched them when they stepped out? It felt as though Mr. Shadow lurked around every corner, a shadow woven into their daily life. With lunch turned cautious, reports of another child missing rang out relentlessly through their television, each beat driving a dagger through Sarah. Her pulse would spike at the thought of Ethan coming home late, and dread clung to her like a second skin. As she pieced it all together, the notes, the items, the vanished children, her heart thundered painfully. Questions festered, twisting like poison vines in her mind. The realization settled cold and heavy. What if Mr. Shadow was someone they knew? Just as she gathered herself to confront this presence she could no longer ignore, the ping of a notification shook the air. Ethan's phone lighted with a message from Mr. Shadow. "I'm closer than you think." Sarah's heart raced at the sight of Ethan's phone lighting up, illuminating the room with an anxious glow. The message hung in the air, curling around her throat like a vice. "I'm closer than you think." It seemed to echo in her ears, a chilling whisper replacing the comforting hum of the night. She stepped inside, each sound amplified, her instincts screaming at her to act. "Ethan!" she called, her voice a tremor. He barely looked up, his eyes glued to the screen that flickered with ominous light. "You need to get off that game." He glanced at her, face flushed with confusion. But the moment faded quickly as his attention returned to Mr. Shadow's digital presence. Every instinct in Sarah pushed her forward, drawn to that phone as if it were a magnet of dread. What did he say? What does he want? Chill, Mom. Yes, just a gamer. We're just having fun. His voice trailed off. But she caught a glimmer of something behind his eyes, a flicker of doubt. Maybe even fear. Fun? Ethan. He sent you that creepy doll. You think that's just fun? I don't want you talking to him. Impulsively, she lunged for the phone, desperate to silence the boy's connection to whatever evil lingered in the digital dark as she reached for it. Ethan snatched it back, flinch in his movements. I don't care what you think, Mom. Yes, my friend. But his outrage was undercut by an unmistakable tremor in his voice. A moment of silence broke out, thick and heavy. The air almost crackled between them, marred by the tension of their confrontation. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, slicing through the silence. Her hands trembled as she fished it out, the screen lighting up with a stark notification from an unknown number. It read, "Your son is playing a dangerous game, Sarah. Don't let him go outside." Chills crept down her spine. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, panic threaded with urgency. Before she could process it, Ethan's body stiffened, eyes wide. "What is that? Who sent it?" Sarah turned cold. Someone knows." On instinct, she moved to the front door, peering through the small window, her heart pounding in her chest like a war drum. The street was empty, shadows creeping across the pavement like lurking phantoms. The world felt wrong, distorted by something unseen. "Mom, you're scaring me." Ethan's voice wavered. "Stay inside," she hissed, her eyes scanning for movement. She thought she saw something by the old oak tree at the end of the street, a figure, shrouded in darkness, watching them. No, it couldn't be. In a rush, she pulled back, heart hammering. The doll's glassy eyes seemed to follow her, mocking her growing fears. "Ethan, we need to go somewhere, anywhere but here. Trust me." The sense of danger was seeping into their very walls. He nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his gaze. Just then, a horrifying realization blasted through her mind. Mr. Shadow wasn't he just online? The phone buzzed again, jolting her from her thoughts. A new message splashed across the screen. "You're not going anywhere, Sarah. You don't know how close I am." Her breath caught. The hairs on the back of her neck stood tall as she spun back to the window, eyes wide. There he was, the figure, now standing nearer, too close to the house, his face obscured by shadows. She could feel the weight of his gaze, piercing her with an unspoken threat. Clenching her fists, she understood this was no longer just about Mr. Shadow being an online predator. They were in real danger. She had to protect Ethan. She had to confront the darkness head-on. But how? Without a moment to lose, she turned to her son. "Ethan, get your things." The pulse of fear raced through her, blocking out all rational thought. But in the depths of her mind, an echo of resolve solidified. As they gathered their belongings, Sarah caught one last glimpse through the window. The figure vanished, leaving only shadows behind. The darkness stretched, thickening like a blanket around her home. They had to go now. But as they stepped outside, the front door creaked ominously behind them, a chilling whisper racing through the night air. It's already too late. With barely a moment to look back, they stepped into the unknown, fear coursing through their veins. Next chapter. But what awaited them in the unfolding night? Would they uncover the truth or walk straight into the snare that had been laid for them? The street felt alive as Sarah and Ethan stepped into the darkness, every crack of twigs and rustle of leaves amplifying their fears. The night air wrapped around them, cooler than before, almost suffocating. Sarah glanced back at their house, its windows dark and unwelcoming now. The thought that they were leaving safety behind sent shivers down her spine. "Where do we go?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, eyes darting nervously. "Just anywhere but here. We need to get to the car." She pointed toward the driveway, trying to keep her voice steady, but panic clawed at her throat. As they moved swiftly, shadows danced at the corners of her vision, flickering like ghosts. She willed herself to look straight ahead, to push the fear away. The car waited, an island of safety in the vast ocean of dread surrounding them. Suddenly, The phone vibrated again in her pocket, its harsh buzz sending a jolt through her. Not now, she hissed under her breath, but the compulsion to check it was unbearable. Mom, we keep moving, Ethan urged, the panic rising in his voice. I know. But her fingers grazed the phone screen, revealing another message. It read, "You 1T find safety in steel and glass. The game's just started, Sarah." Heart slamming against her ribs, she shoved it back into her pocket. Ethan, hurry, she urged, her eyes scanning the dark street. They moved faster now, limbs propelled by adrenaline. Each step felt heavier than the last, like they were wading through molasses. The car loomed closer, but dread seeped back into her heart. They were being watched. She could feel it, that chilling sensation prickling the hairs on her neck. Finally, they reached the car. Sarah fumbled with the keys, her fingers trembling as she struggled to find the right one. The parked vehicle felt like a door to escape, yet her desperation anchored her in place. Mom, please. Ethan's voice trembled as he looked around, eyes wide with fear. Just a second, she said, her throat tightened. At last, the key slid into the lock, and she twisted it, the engine roaring to life like a startled beast. But as she turned to throw the car into gear, the darkness outside rushed toward them, a figure, rushing from the shadows in a blur of motion. Her heart stopped. Get down, she screamed, instinctively ducking low as the door shook with a violent thud. The impact had come from the figure, who now slammed against the car, features blurry and twisted under the flickering streetlight. Sarah's breath hitched. It was him, Mr. Shadow, now manifest in the flesh. Let him play, he screamed, voice distorted and hollow, mingled with laughter that stung her ears. You can't stop him. Go, Mom, go, Ethan shouted, gripping the seat tight, fear radiating from him like heat. Without thinking, she pressed the gas, roaring down the street, heart racing as they tore away from the nightmare. But as they sped into the darkness, a sickening realization settled in. This wasn't just about Ethan's game anymore. It was something far more sinister, more real. The road stretched out before them, but Sarah's heart sank deeper. The car rocked as something hit the rear, a reminder that they weren't alone. She dared a glance in the rearview mirror, dread curling in her stomach. And there he was, shadows flickering around him like a second skin, keeping pace easily, a sinister grin plastered across his face. Mom, Ethan yelled, fear cracking his voice. What do we do? With desperate energy focused on survival, Sarah turned sharply into an alleyway, the echoes of danger hot on their heels. But what lurked in the large, dark spaces ahead? What awaited them as city lights dimmed further behind? A chilling fear took root. Could they escape what had already ensnared them? The alley swallowed them in shadows, the car's headlights throwing splashes of light against damp brick walls. The tires screeched, bouncing over debris as Sarah turned the wheel hard, panic slipping into her every movement. Where are we going? Ethan's voice trembled, thick with fear. Each word dripped uncertainty, the same suffocating feeling she felt closing in on her. Somewhere safe, she shouted back, a half-hearted attempt at reassurance. But even she didn't believe it. The air turned stale, and an acrid smell of something rotting made Sarah gag. She pressed the accelerator, the engine roaring defiantly, but each bump sent jolts of anxiety racing through her. Behind them, the sound of footfalls haunted the narrow passage, echoing off the grimy walls. Faster, Mom! Ethan's voice climbed higher, edged in terror. She didn't need to be told twice. Just as she reached a small crossover, a figure appeared, darting from behind a dumpster. Her heart lurched, an instinctive jolt of fear rushing through her veins. They had to get out now. As she swerved to avoid this new threat, her hands shook with desperation. She caught another glance in the rearview mirror. He was still there, relentless. Mr. Shadow was gaining momentum, his mocking laughter intertwining with the chaos of the world around them. There's nowhere to go. Ethan cried, tears brimming in his eyes. Shoo! She snapped, focusing on the path ahead. Was there really nowhere left to escape to? They burst out of the alley onto a desolate street, streetlights flickering in and out like dying stars. Silhouettes of abandoned storefronts loomed ahead, casting long, inviting shadows. Sparking an idea, she drove toward a nearby parking garage, hoping it would buy them time. Why are we stopping? Ethan's confusion mirrored her own internal turmoil. Just a second, Sarah muttered, gripping the steering wheel, her pulse racing. They pulled into a space on the third level, the atmosphere thick with tension. She killed the engine, the roar fading into a suffocating silence. With the headlights cutting through the dark, she peered through the windshield, searching for any sign of movement. Did we lose him? Ethan's tone was hesitant, laced with hope. But before she could answer, a sound made her stomach plummet. Heavy footsteps on the concrete ramp. They were close. Hide! She shouted, instinctively pushing him down low in the seat. She crouched next to him, body tense, adrenaline surging like fire in her veins. As the footsteps grew nearer, Sarah could only hear the pounding of her own heart, thundering in sync with the sinister echo surrounding them. She stifled a gasp as the figure made its way into the garage, shadowing their small vehicle. Ethan squeezed her hand, terror evident on his face. With every breath, Sarah fought to stay quiet, straining to listen. Was it him, or had she led them into something worse? The figure paused, an unseen silhouette just beyond the reach of her headlights, as if sniffing at the air. Sarah, a whisper ghosted through the darkness. That wasn't he, Mr. Shadow. A chill ran down her spine as icy dread gripped her. The voice felt familiar and yet so utterly wrong. Ethan, she murmured, her voice barely there, we need to go now. Just as she reached for the keys, the lights flickered off, plunging them into total blackness. Heart racing, she fumbled with her phone's flashlight, just a glimmer in the enveloping abyss. But what awaited them in that suffocating silence? Who or what had lurked closer than she had anticipated? The line between predator and prey blurred. Mom, Ethan barely breathed. Before she could answer, the garage rumbled, thick darkness pressing in. What laid in wait was worse than any nightmare. She felt it crawl under her skin. They weren't alone. What twisted horror had they stumbled into? Would it be their end or a desperate chance at escape? The shadows crawled closer, dark forms shifting just beyond the reach of light. Sarah gripped her phone tighter, the glow flickering like a candle in a storm. The eerie silence screamed, filling the space with an unspeakable dread. Was it really her name he had whispered, or an insidious echo of something buried deeper? Mom, Ethan whimpered again, each syllable dripping with raw fear. She could barely breathe. The air felt thick, smothering. She turned, her eyes wide, praying the darkness would yield a sign of hope. A soft tapping echoed through the parking garage, like fingernails against metal. Each sound reverberated in Sarah's ears, sending cold shivers down her spine. It was getting closer. She couldn't make out the figure, but the weight of its presence pressed against her chest, squeezing the air tight. Just stay quiet, she whispered, forcing her voice steady, though her heart pounded a frantic rhythm. She searched the darkness, desperate to spot any detail, a silhouette, a sign of movement, but all she found was the malevolent silence. The familiar voice twisted within her mind, haunting and taunting. It was almost as if Mr. Shadow was playing a cruel game, coyly stalking his prey. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence, a sound full of agony. Not from Ethan. Sarah's breath boxied as her instincts shot to high alert. Panic surged through her. Had someone else stumbled into this nightmare? Mom! Ethan squeezed her hand harder, his fear a tangible force. What if it's him? She held his gaze, her mind racing. They couldn't stay here. Whatever lurked in the darkness was getting closer, and the sound of footsteps had shifted more than one pair now. It was a hunting party, and they were the quarry. Get down, she whispered urgently. Throwing caution to the wind, Sarah forced the car door open and peeked outside. The mayhem unfolded with each passing moment. Twisted shadows danced near the entrances, merging the outlines of each abandoned car into monstrous forms. Look, Ethan breathed, pointing just beyond the glare of her phone light. A figure slumped against a pillar, its back turned, unresponsive. Sweat trickled down Sarah's neck as she squinted. It definitely wasn't Mr. Shadow. And so, it couldn't be a rescue. Stay close, she instructed, her heart pounding. They edged out together, quick and silent, doing their best to meld into the background. But every instinct screamed that they were being watched. With relentless determination, she moved toward the nearest staircase, praying the texture of the cold concrete would stay smooth underfoot. She scanned the area for any signs of life, every step bringing a surge of adrenaline and terror. "Hurry," she breathed. "We have to go now." But then the figures became clear, and another scream echoed, ripping through the air. This time it was human, desperate. Sarah's blood ran cold. There was a struggle on the far side of the garage, a man wrestling with a shadowy form. The sounds of panic and agony twisted together, an unsettling symphony of horror that froze her in place. In that moment, the world tilted on its axis. The realization slammed into her: the hunters had become the hunted. "Mom!" Ethan tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide with pleading. "What do we do?" Sarah's mind raced. They could hide, but there was a chance they'd be discovered. She thought of the car, the keys, their only chance of escape. But just then, the oppressive darkness shifted. The man fell silent, consumed. They were out of time. Heart pounding in her throat, Sarah clenched Ethan's hand tighter, muscles tensing as she prepared to flee. But which way to go? The staircase ahead loomed ominously. "Run for it," Ethan suggested, barely a whisper. Before Sarah could respond, a cold breeze swept through the garage, a sinister promise of what lay ahead. The shadows pressed in closer. Then, through the chaos of sound and shadows, a voice roared, deep, chilling, and unmistakably furious. "You think you can hide?" Time froze as dread coiled in Sarah's gut. They had to run, but in which direction? As trends of darkness shifted and converged around them, Sarah realized they were no longer in control. What awaited them was far more than just a chance of escape. And then, she heard the unmistakable sound of slivers of laughter that twisted through the darkness, drawing nearer as the hunt intensified. Would they emerge from the grips of this darkness, or become mere echoes lost amidst the fading screams? The voice echoed again, a sinister whisper that wrapped around Sarah like a snake. "You think you can escape? Your fear makes you delicious." The laughter returned, a cacophony of chilling notes that slithered into her ears. It wasn't just one entity. It felt like an entire chorus of shadows, delighting in the terror that spilled from her and Ethan. "Run!" Sarah shouted, her instincts igniting. Without a second thought, she grabbed Ethan and sprinted toward the staircase, a heartbeat consuming every moment. The cold concrete felt unforgiving beneath her shoes, but she pushed on. Each step was a gamble with the darkness, and behind them, she sensed the malevolence swell. Shadows reached out hungrily, as if desperate to snag them with icy fingers. Ethan's breath was ragged, his small feet struggling to keep pace. "Mom, I can't," he gasped, fear cracking his voice. "Just a little further," she urged, forcing herself to breathe steady. Yet, the pit in her stomach deepened. She was painfully aware that their race was not just against fatigue. They were racing against a growing storm of malice. That as they reached the staircase, the emergency lights flickered to life, casting a sickly blue glow. Shadows twisted at the edges, warping the space around them. They were not safe yet. Sarah could already hear the footfalls behind them, relentless and hungry. "Which way?" Ethan panted, glancing back as panic spread across his young features. The darkness throbbed with a life of its own. "Up!" She grabbed Ethan's wrist and pulled him forward, heading to the next level where the light might be brighter. The air might feel less suffocating. With each step, she felt dread creeping in, absorbing her thoughts. Were they leading themselves into a trap? As they emerged onto the next floor, Sarah's heart dropped. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, just past another flickering light. It was too tall, the shape wrong in ways she couldn't articulate. The shadows twisted around it, and its face, oh God, the face. Featureless, yet disturbingly human, like an item left in the sun too long. "Mom," Ethan whispered, a tremor in his voice. She felt his small hand quaking in hers as they stumbled backward, nearly retreating back into the staircase. But then came a sound that made her blood run cold, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air, a warning that they were far from alone. Just then, the emergency lights flickered violently, each pulse feeling like a heartbeat drumming to a rhythm of looming death. In that stuttering illumination, fleeting images flashed around them. She saw the faces of frantic souls, eyes wide, terror frozen in time, caught in a dance with shadows much like her own. "Keep moving," Sarah hissed, her voice taut, and she propelled them toward the far exit, praying it wasn't a dead end. The growling beast behind them ramped up, eager for the chase. She could nearly taste the rancid air suffused with its swirling malice, a toxic cocktail of her fear. And as they dashed past another flickering light, she caught a glimpse of something that made her blood turn to ice. The walls were etched with markings, warning signs of ancient magic twisted in dreadful incantations. The realization sank in a spell was woven throughout this accursed garage. They were not just being hunted. They were being drawn into a trap meant to feed something far worse than any nightmare they could imagine. Sarah felt it, then a feathery touch against her back, slipping like smoke. She screamed, turning just in time to meet an empty gaze, a shadow with a grin that threatened to suck in the sanity of anyone who dared look too long. "Just keep running," she shouted again, her resolve hardening. They couldn't stop, not for anything. But in the throb of the garage, a sense of reality slanted grotesquely. With each frantic step, she feared they were rushing towards horrors unraveling, and a part of her couldn't shake the feeling the shadows weren't only closing in, they were gathering power. And then she heard it. A soft, slithering laugh echoing, reverberating off the walls, melding with the growl. "You can't escape. Not yet." As she lashed out, ready to confront whatever waited, Sarah could feel the tug of the unseen drawing tighter. Were they running into salvation, or deeper into the maw of darkness? She had no idea. Just as they reached the far exit, the darkness surged with a powerful force, blocking their path. "Mom, what do we do now?" Ethan quivered beside her, the weight of despair settling like lead in the air. Time stood still, as shadows converged, filling every corner of the garage. Sarah clung to her son, the walls of her resolve trembling. "Hold on tight," she commanded, breath hitching, as she braced for the unknown that awaited them. And suddenly, just before the dark claimed them, a blinding flash pierced through the strangled silence, a light, bright and invasive, illuminating the horrors in an otherworldly glow. What terrifying truth lay buried in the depths of the shadows? And would they ever escape the clutches of the secrets lurking in the darkness? The light burst into the garage, white and blinding, scattering shadows like a gust of wind. Instinctively, Sarah shielded her eyes, dragging Ethan closer, expecting the horror to plunge deep into the rays illuminating their escape. When she dared to look again, the figure at the end of the corridor had vanished. The growling had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. Sarah's heart raced, the relentless beat a backdrop to her fear. What had happened? Had the light chased the darkness away, if only for a moment? But even that thought brought dread. The shadows had not retreated far. They loomed, restless, just beyond the reach of the light. She glanced around, desperate for a hint of safety, searching for an exit, but now everything felt distorted. The walls twisted with those terrifying symbols, their meaning lost to her mind yet burning deep in her soul. "Mom, what was that?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. He looked up, eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know," she admitted, her throat dry. "But we need to keep moving." They stepped cautiously into the light's embrace, creeping further down the corridor. Every flicker of brightness cast a harsh reminder of the lurking danger. Even the air felt different here, growing heavier, thicker, choking with the remnants of fear they could still taste as they faltered forward. A sudden noise caught her attention, a clicking sound, methodical and rhythmic, echoing from the depths of the darkened corners where the light dared not penetrate. It was like claws scraping against concrete. "Don't stop," Sarah urged, spurring Ethan forward as they weaved past stray, jagged pieces of machinery abandoned in the labyrinth. Each movement felt like a choreographed dance with death, their instincts screaming at them to escape the growing presence lurking in the shadows. But then, without warning, the lights began to flicker again, a pulse that seemed to sync with her racing heart. With every flicker, the shadows danced closer, reforming into shapes that felt disturbingly familiar. Eager fingers grasped at the edges of her mind, dragging her thoughts back to that whisper. "Your fear makes you delicious." The laughter swelled again, filling her ears until she could barely hear herself think. It was mocking, cruel, a taunt that crumbled her confidence. "Mom, I can't breathe," Ethan gasped, tightening his grip on her hand. "Stay close, Ethan," she urged, the fear in his voice gnawing at her resolve. "We can't stop. We have to find that exit." They turned another corner, and there it was, a door at the end of the hall, dimly illuminated with the last flickers of light. A leaden hope pulled her forward, but even as they rushed toward it, the air turned electric, filled with a tension that pressed against their skin. Just as they neared the door, a fierce gust swept through the hallway, extinguishing the lights in an instant, plunging them into darkness. The shadows shifted, swirling violently around her, closing in like a living cloak. Ethan's whimper pierced the void, and panic surged in Sarah's chest. "No, we can't stop," she shouted, desperately pushing on through the pitch blackness, unwilling to succumb to despair. "Keep calling for me, Ethan. I can't lose you." In response, a low growl rumbled through the silence. It echoed around them, cycling through her bones and making her skin crawl. A flash ignited her vision again, this time a dark figure lunged into view, its featureless face grinning with a grotesque hunger. Her mind raced. She had to find a way out. "Mom, help!" Ethan screamed as the shadows clawed at their heels. "Right here," she cried, pulling him closer. She could feel something clawing at her resolve. In that moment, across the chaos, a painful truth sunk in. The trap wasn't built of physical walls, but a web of fear that tangled around them. A cacophony of whispers, indistinguishable voices in the dark, surged back. "You can't get away. We're woven into the fabric of this place." With one last desperate push, Sarah hurled herself and Ethan at the door, praying it would open. But as she grasped the handle, she realized it was cold, impossibly cold, and neither of them could turn it. What dark mercy awaited them on the other side, if they could even reach it? Or were they destined to become part of the shadows? Another tale whispered through the darkness. Sarah tugged at the door, desperation coursing through her veins. It was solid, anchored in place, as if the world itself conspired to keep them enclosed in this darkness. The shadows pressed closer, brushing against her skin with icy fingers, taunting her. She turned her head, seeking any glimmer of hope, but only saw Ethan's wide eyes reflecting the dim remnants of light still flickering behind them. "Mom!" Ethan whimpered, his voice a fragile thread tugging on her sanity. "I can't feel my legs." No, you're fine," Sarah insisted, her voice a raw whisper. She couldn't let him see her fear. She couldn't show weakness. "Not now. Just focus on me. We can break through, I know it." Just as she flung her shoulder against the door with all her weight, the growl returned, a low snarl vibrating through the air. The sound slithered into her bones, deeper and darker than anything she had felt before. Heart racing, she screamed, "Get away from us!" Like that would chase the terror off. But it only grew louder, an echo feeding on their fear. It morphed, twisted, and shifted, dragging her mind into places she could scarcely comprehend. The shadows laughed, long and slow, a malicious melody that filled the oppressive silence. "Your fear, it's so sweet," the voice cooed, draping over Sarah like a shroud. Somewhere behind her, the clicking noise resumed, curious and relentless, approaching them from the inky void. It was relentless, a countdown to darkness. "Mom, we need to hide." Ethan's quivering voice sliced through her haze of panic. "Hide? Where?" Sarah snapped, urgency clawing at her throat. Ethan's feet shuffled nervously, his breath becoming shallow. "Here." He pointed to the narrow space below the stairs, a sliver of darkness they might fit into. Okay, okay, she murmured, grabbing his hand and dragging him toward the cramped space. They wedged themselves in tight, pressing their bodies against the cold, unforgiving metal of the staircase. The flickering light above them cast distorted shadows that danced against the walls, teasingly mimicking the figures she had seen before. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, muffling his whimpers into Sarah's side. She wanted to tell him everything would be all right, that the dark could never touch them, but the heavy weight of uncertainty stifled her words. Instead, all she could manage was to choke back her own terror, clenching her fists until her nails bit into her palm. Then the pulsating growl shifted. It became a symphony of deep, guttural sounds, shifting closer as if it were savoring the scent of their fear. The air thickened, a noxious fog swirling around them as each sound grew louder, closer. "Mom," Ethan whispered, voice trembling. "What if it finds us? I won't let it. Just stay quiet." "Ethan," she urged, barely able to breathe herself. The shadows drew closer, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket, pressing against her ears until all she heard was the sound of rushing blood. Suddenly, the growl turned into cruel laughter that reverberated through the space, causing them to quake. "You think you can hide? The darkness knows where you are and it is hungry." Sarah could feel the color drain from her face. The shadows were no longer simply haunting shapes. They were alive, aware, and eager to claim them. A jolt of resolve struck her as she thought of Ethan. She couldn't let them win. "Look at me, Ethan," she whispered fiercely, her heart racing. "We will find a way out. Just trust me." Summoning every ounce of strength, she peered around the corner of the stairs, searching for any sign of an escape route as the shadows closed in. But just as hope flickered in her chest, a pair of glowing eyes emerged from the dark, locking onto her like a predator spotting its prey. The laughter crescendoed, echoing in a nightmarish symphony that promised doom, and Sarah's voice caught in her throat. Would this be their ending? Lost forever in the clutches of the dark? Or was there still a path to salvation, a way to fight against the encroaching horror? With terror flooding her every thought, she turned back to Ethan, hope and dread battling inside her. "Are you ready to run?" she whispered urgently, blood pounding in her ears. What choice would they make when the only thing more fearsome than the shadows was the truth of what they faced? As Sarah's trembling hand gripped Ethan's, the glow of the creature's eyes sharpened, narrowing like a hunter's focus. It was a dim light, hazy and sickening in its glow, like the remnants of a dying flame. Panic coiled tightly in her chest. There was no hiding now. The darkness was no longer an abstract threat. It was a tangible predator stalking them, savoring the scent of their fear. "Mom!" Ethan's voice cracked, hysteria lowering it to a whisper. But Sarah didn't let go. How could she? She couldn't let the darkness take him. Not like this. Together. "We run on 3, Sarah decided, hoping her steel resolve would steady his fluttering heart. She counted in her head, forcing out the numbers amidst the chaos. 1, 2. The creature rasped a breath, low and guttural, as if preparing to lunge. Its laughter reverberated around them, an awful sound that echoed in the very marrow of her bones. She could feel the heat radiating from it, the intensity of its hunger thick in the air. 3, she barked, like a gunshot in the suffocating dark. They burst from their hiding place like a pair of wild animals, racing blindly through the crawling shadows. They stumbled forward, each step a desperate plea for survival. Sarah pressed onward, dragging Ethan along, the cold metal of the stairs biting into her side as she bolted past its treacherous edge. A flicker of light caught her eye, a flash of promise in the deep murk, and she felt a spark of hope blossom. There, an open door, just 10 feet ahead, so close yet so far. "Run. Keep up," she yelled, urging Ethan faster. The growl hung in the air, more of a visceral pulse that clawed at her back, growing more insistent, more demanding. The yapping laughter echoed, taunting, becoming closer, closer. Every footfall felt like thunder, her heart slamming against her ribs, urging her on as if it's its own entity, trying to escape the approaching doom. "Mom, I can't." Ethan's breath hitched, but she couldn't stop. "Not now." A sudden, alien movement drew her attention, a flicker in the shadows that murmured at the edges of her vision. They weren't just entering the door. Something was after them. Something long, dark, and twisted slithered along the walls, blending with the shadows as if it were made from them. "Ethan, move!" she shouted, and the door loomed before them, an otherworldly glow pushing back the haze of promise. They lunged together, bursting through with the last push of adrenaline. Sarah turned around to slam the door, but just as she did, a long, spindly hand shot through the gap, jagged nails scraping against the wood, cracking the surface. "No!" she screamed, adrenaline surging like fire in her veins. She couldn't let it in. Not like this. With her back pressed against the door, she pushed with all her strength, her voice fierce with fear. "Don't you dare touch him!" But the creature snickered, the sound bile rising in her throat. "You think this is the end? You're wrong." The inner sanctum transformed before her eyes into a swirling blackness, the only light flickering in and out. Shadows merged into figures, twisting, writhing in their hunger. Ethan's whimpers echoed in her ears, sending cold dread spiraling down her spine. At that moment, she saw a glimpse, a flash of light beyond the dark intent. It was a staircase leading upward, a way to escape this hell. "Ethan, up the stairs!" she commanded, moving aside just enough to let him pass. But terror clawed at her as she felt the thing behind her ramp up its frenzy, intent on latching on. The creature's claw met old wood, splinters bursting forth, scraping against Sarah's palm. "Go!" she screamed again, pushing Ethan toward salvation. A second's hesitation felt like a lifetime as she weighed her own fate. Distrust returned, gnawing at her determination. What if this was only a trap? What if the shadows beckoned her? But the frantic breaths of her son propelled her to act. She darted into the unknown, insisting with all her might to flick the shadows off her soul, to sever the hold it tried to establish. They surged upward, the air thick with a murky dread. But, just then, a voice echoed, unmistakable, a whisper from beyond that promised more than darkness. It offered the allure of truth. "You don't know what lies beyond." Sarah, as they climbed, footfalls echoing through the abyss. A feeling settled deep in her gut. They had escaped the dark, but was it truly over? Or had the true horror only just begun? A door at the top creaked open, revealing the faint glimmers of day. But would the outside world be any safer? Or would the shadows follow? "Ethan, hold on tight." What awaited them outside? More monsters? Or was the darkness something they couldn't leave behind so easily? As Sarah and Ethan burst through the door, the blinding light of day assaulted their senses, pushing the gloom back for a moment. The air felt crisp, sharp against their skin, as they stepped onto the warm pavement outside. Sunlight bathed them in reassurance. Yet it came with a task, a primal urge to run, to put as much distance between them and the darkness that clawed at their heels just moments ago. "Mom, are we safe?" Ethan breathed, staring up at her with those trusting eyes, searching for something to hold on to amid the chaos they had endured. Yes, we're okay," she forced out, though her heart raced, each beat a reminder of the horrors that might still linger just beyond the reach of the sun. She knelt down to his level, her hands on his shoulders. "But we need to keep moving. We can't stop now." They sprinted down the street, passing by faded houses and cracked sidewalks, each step ringing with urgency. The world felt almost surreal, as though they had emerged from a nightmare and into a strange dream, bright, but somehow distorted. Each bright garden and cheerful bird seemed to mock the darkness they had narrowly escaped. But something nagged at the back of her mind. What if Mr. Shadow had followed them? What if they hadn't escaped at all? "Where are we going?" Ethan panted, a tremor in his voice, the question catching a thread of fear lodged deep within her. "Anywhere but here," she replied breathlessly, glancing over her shoulder. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, taunting her with memories she wished to leave behind. They picked up the pace, heading for the park at the end of the street where they could find refuge. As they pushed through the gates, the smell of grass and flowers filled the air. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it was merely a comforting mask hiding a malevolence lurking just behind. They chose a secluded bench away from prying eyes, huddling close together. "We'll rest here for a moment," she said, attempting to quell her fear for Ethan's sake. "Do you think it's gone?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know, Ethan, but I promise we'll be all right." Her heart ached as she watched his small frame tremble with anxiety. How could she reassure him when she felt so lost herself? Just then, a familiar vibration broke the silence. It was her phone. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. Sarah's breath hitched. She shoved it down, desperate not to look, but Ethan's eyes darted to it, wide and pleading. "Mom, what does it say?" "I can't read it right now." But it felt like fingers of dread pulling at her resolve, whispering in her mind not to ignore the cold reality awaiting them. That familiar sense of being watched crawled back, tighter, squeezing her chest. Ethan's soft voice dragged her back. "What if it's still looking for us?" Just as the words left his lips, a heavy silence blanketed the park. The vibrant sounds of children playing felt like echoes from a different dimension, distant and out of reach. Panic tried to grip her again, but Sarah forced her eyes to remain level. "We have to face this, Ethan. Whatever it is, we can't let it control us." Yet just as she gathered the strength to comfort him, shadows flickered at the edges of the park's trees, and suddenly, a figure emerged, one she recognized. But it shouldn't be here. It was Mr. Shadow, his features still obscured, just beyond the sunlight. The laughter echoed deep within her, sending icy shards of dread down her back, reminding her of how close he had come to destroying them. "Hello?" Sarah, the figure's voice oozed with malice, sweet like poison on the tongue. "You thought you could outrun the darkness?" Trembling, Sarah instinctively pulled Ethan closer. "Leave us alone," she cried out, feeling strength building in her voice. "I'm afraid it's too late for that. You've already played the game and it never truly ends." With that, a sudden realization slashed through her. They hadn't merely escaped. They had been ensnared in a web woven from darkness and nightmares. She clutched Ethan's hand, ready to stand her ground. "Enough!" she shouted, voice strong and unwavering, holding on to the words she meant to fight against. "You won't take us. We will face this together." Ethan gazed up at her, a mix of confusion and determination brightening his wide eyes. An unexpected surge of courage rippled through Sarah, kindling the flame that flickered low but never fully extinguished. "Let us end this game," she said, clenching Ethan's hand, vowing to both herself and her son that they wouldn't fall back into fear. The air vibrated with tension, hanging between them like a taut bowstring stretched tight with potential. "Very well," Mr. Shadow hissed, lingering in the glare of the light. "But remember, the shadows always find a way. And sometimes they are a part of you." But before he could move closer, something remarkable happened. The light surrounding Sarah and Ethan pulsed, brightening, forcing the shadows to retreat. In that moment, Sarah realized they had the power together, resolute and unyielding. They could conquer the darkness. As the light intensified, the edges of the figure blurred, lost to the warmth engulfing her. "Let us go, Ethan," she urged, relief flooding her voice. Hand in hand, they walked steadily toward the light, leaving Mr. Shadow and echoes of his laughter behind, forging ahead into an uncertain yet hopeful future. And as they stepped through the threshold, they felt a weight lift. The burden of terror shattered, replaced by the promise of healing and bright days ahead. Though the darkness might always linger at the edges, they had discovered the key to pushing it away, the unwavering bond of their love. "Together, always," Sarah whispered, glancing down at her son, who smiled back with newfound strength. Yes, they had faced the dark, and emerged from its chilling grasp into the warm embrace of life once more. The shadows might always linger, but they had chosen to confront them. They had chosen to live. Wow, what a story, right? I hope you enjoyed the ride and the closure for Sarah and Ethan. If you want to dive deeper into this world and see what other stories unfold, you need to subscribe to the channel now. Don't miss out on the next exclusive tales that will thrill you to your core. Also, smash that like button seriously, it helps so much with the algorithm. You want to keep those stories coming, right? And I want to hear from you. Flood that comments section with your reactions and theories. What did you think about the ending? Did Sarah make the right choice? Finally, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. True fans know we must support the channel to keep the stories alive.